Thank you for listening to Footnotes, a Fellowship Mosaic podcast. This is a space for us to dig deeper into Scripture, what is happening in our community and culture, and continue the conversations we start on Saturday nights. We're excited to have you join us as we pursue truth, holiness, and redemption together.
So we're studying the book of Acts, and we're going to be in it for 42 of the next 52 weeks. And I know I've said that in a it may be like, wow, so much time in one thing kind of way, but I do think there is something pretty significant about choosing to spend a whole year really settled deeply in a single piece of literature, a single medium of something. Like there's a podcast that I'm aware exists in the world where they choose one terrible movie and they watch it weekly and record a podcast about it weekly for an entire year.
What?
Same film. And so there's something about like what will happen to you as you marinate in a thing for a long time. And so I know that that's a piece of what you're excited about in studying the book of Acts over a long period. What are some of the other, I don't know, things that you've been stirring on that are like, I think this is what Acts is either setting us up for, or some of the things that I've noticed are needs that Mosaic has that I would like to kind of put a finger on?
I think, so some of this is just my personality, but I am constantly asking the why question. And so I'm kind of, one of my fears is always that we're doing something just because we do it and we've lost the plot on why we do this thing. And so I think Mosaic, this applies both to Mosaic and Fellowship as a whole. Like, we've gone through a ton of change in the last few years, from launching Fellowship Bentonville to Samaritan, Christ and Neighbor, Anthology New York. And then there's a lot more in the future as Fellowship is looking at, launching congregations in several different places in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so there is kind of this, I think the possibility of just kind of replicating something we've done and has worked, and the formula over and over again. And I've wanted to ask the question, like, is the formula the thing? Yep. Or is there something deeper that I actually love the formula in that sense. I love what we do here at Fellowship, but I am constantly drawn back to the why of the thing. Even if it doesn't lead you to change anything you're doing, I think it infuses purpose in a really powerful way. I remember Brian Pope, who was our youth pastor growing up. Yep. He used an illustration one time where he showed this medieval torture device that they would have people use that literally would make people go insane. It was so horrible. And it was basically a treadmill. It was a medieval treadmill. And he said, like, at one point in history, it was a torture device, and now it's something people pay money for to have in their home. And he said the difference is, when it was used as torture, it was the definition of futility. Like, you're taking steps and getting nowhere. But when you have a purpose of getting in shape, it suddenly becomes like, oh, this is a huge resource. I can run anytime I want, in any weather, and I can get in shape, and it's awesome. And he would make the point that, like, purpose changes everything. It can change torture into, like, a privilege. And so, for me, one of the things I'm excited about the book of Acts is I don't think we're going to read Acts over the next year and go, oh, my goodness, look at this thing that the church is supposed to be doing that we've been ignoring. I doubt we're going to have any of those shocking moments, but I'm hoping that as we read the book of Acts of what the early church did, that it'll just kind of infuse why into a lot of things that we're doing. And it might lead to some trajectory shifts where we go, you know what, we have veered away from focusing on this thing that God calls the church to, and we need to recenter that. So that's what I'm really excited about, is in a time when we as a congregation have gone through so much change, culture's going through so much change, to be really driven by what God calls the church to be. That's kind of, I mean, I'm doing that in my life. Like, every year I'm re-asking why am I doing this? Why do I do this job? Why am I parenting this way? Why are we doing this in marriage? So that's part of my personality anyway. So I'm excited for that, for a year of just kind of constantly turning over that why stone of kind of what's under this and under the hood of what we're doing, to mix my metaphors horribly.
No, it's good. Yeah, there's it's probably apocryphal, but story that has floated around of a family trying to figure out why the family recipe was when you bake the ham, you cut the top, 4 inches of the ham off. And they finally asked the grandmother, and it was like, well, because my oven was a small oven and I could never fit the whole ham, so I always just cut the top of the ham off and put it in a separate dish. Like it was just functional.
Hilarious,
there was something going on. So are we replicating something that served a purpose at some time and is not purposeful now? Or, so yeah, I do think this is going to be a mirror of sorts of reflection, a little space to go. Are we on the right track? Are we doing what the church has been doing and is supposed to be doing? It might serve as a windshield to kind of show us where we're headed and what we ought to be, like give us some vision of where we're going. So, when you think about the book of Acts itself, you did our kind of kickoff message and did a little overview, and you've kind of done that internally as well, kind of teaching some of the staff team different breakdowns of the book. Anything that you would want to kind of cast vision for, like what is the book of Acts for, or what's the purpose of this letter? What might we come away learning a year from now?
A couple of things that I think are really important in Acts that really drive the why behind the book. First of all, is the role of the apostles, and that's really crucial, and it's something in our tradition. I don't know if we talk about. I feel pretty confident we don't talk about enough. Is that Jesus never wrote a book. He gave us no sacred writings.
Yeah.
And yet we're told he's the final revelation. Like, he's it. Like, Hebrews 1 says, in the past, God spoke through various prophets in different ways, but now in these last days, he has spoken through his son. Jesus is like it. He's what everything was driving toward. And so why do we have no written word from Jesus, and yet these scriptures that are our final word? The answer is Jesus entrusted his gospel, his message, to a group of people that were eyewitnesses of his life and resurrection. And they were the messengers entrusted to establish this church. And so Paul says in Ephesians that the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. And so that foundational element of their witness is really important, that a lot of other traditions, I think, emphasize more. And so I think that's important for us to understand when we say, even that creed that we repeat often that says we believe in an apostolic church. What does that word mean? And I think it means we're founded on the witness of the apostles, that is the witness that these people that God entrusted the word to is really what we go back to over and over again. So the reason I think that matters is this is totally counter 21st century culture, but it's the way most human history has been. We tend to think that whatever's best is whatever new idea is out there. So whatever is the truest, most beautiful thing, we haven't found it yet. We're still in search of truth and meaning and life. And the perspective of the church for a long time was, no, actually meaning is found in the past. Deep meaning and truth is found in they would use the word a deposit. There was this sense that Jesus deposited something with the apostles, his gospel, and they were to be guardians of it and to pass it on to the next generation. So that rootedness, I think, gives a wonderful anchor to the church. We don't have to be, we're not anti-culture, we're not anti things moving forward, but it is a deep anchor that I think is important. So that's one element. Another is the empowering presence of the Spirit in the church, and just being reminded that we are a supernatural people. Like, we are a people deeply connected to God, and it is his presence in the Spirit that shapes everything that we are. Two more things that stand out about the book of Acts that I think are crucial. The next one would be the connection of the life of Jesus to the church today. That, many people in scholarship, both in scholarship and in kind of pop culture, have some form, we mentioned this last Saturday, some form of the idea of like, Jesus is awesome, but this institutional church thing I reject. That Jesus never envisioned a church. I've heard people say that, like Jesus never started a church.
Yep.
And the answer is yes, he did. Like, Jesus absolutely, in the book of Acts, commissioned and laid the groundwork for the church and told the apostles to go do this. And so that idea of like grounding the church in the mission of Jesus and showing how we get from the rabbi prophet going through the hills of Galilee to the global church, I think is a crucial part of this book. And that kind of leads to the final thing that I think is so cool about the book is the fact that Acts has one of the most anticlimactic endings in the Bible. Like in Acts chapter 1, Jesus commissions the apostles and says, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." And then you get to the end of the book, and Paul has been sent to Jerusalem. He's having this big trial. There's this big buildup, and then the book just ends. And most people think that is a deliberate thing, that in many ways the idea is you are supposed to have this sense of a story that started but isn't finished. And the whole church for the last 2,000 years is supposed to see themselves as the continuation of the book of Acts. N.T. Wright has a metaphor that I think is really cool. He imagines, what if we found what was supposed to be a 5-act Shakespearean play, but the 5th act was lost? So if a company then wanted to try to perform the play, how would they go about it? Well, they would know the arc of how Shakespearean stories work. They would pay attention to the characters and the characterization in the first 4 acts. And then they would have to improv a 5th act in a way that is consistent with the story, consistent with the characters, but they aren't given a script. And he kind of says that's the place of the church today. Like, we are given the trajectory, and we're given the characterization of who we are to be. But then we have to, with Holy Spirit guidance, go live that out where we are in a way that's consistent with what we're given. And I think that's a pretty fun, compelling vision for the church.
That's good, yeah. And probably where the 5th act analogy breaks down for us is that we aren't in the 5th act, we're in the 455th act.
Yes.
And if it were just a play that we're missing the last 450 acts, we would it would probably be pretty understandable that it would not be a good continuation of that first thing if it was just building on the source of the material is far in the distance. But with the activity of God ongoing in his people and the continued guidance of the Spirit, I think we can say, hey, if what we're seeing here still feels faithful to those first 4 revealed chapters, then maybe we're onto something. So
yeah, I think that's right. That is the tension of the next 1900 years of church history is on the one hand, 1900 years in the salvation plan of God is one era. In one sense, we're in the same era of history as the 2nd century Christians.
Yeah.
And yet, in another sense, a lot has happened in 1900 years, and we're not where the 4th century church was or the 15th century church. And so we should grow and develop, and we should have a church that looks like some blend of 1st century Jerusalem and 21st century North America, as we try to live that out faithfully. So yeah, there's a lot to think about there. And as one of my friends who's a church planner, he used to say, the scriptures give us some must-dos, some must-not-dos, and then a whole lot of flexibility. And the list of must and must-nots is actually pretty short.
Yeah.
There is a remarkable amount of flexibility room to be creative as we pursue the Lord. So being clear on the must and the must-nots is really important. And then God gives us a lot of space to run, which is pretty exciting, which is also why I feel, even thinking about our church in the larger context of Northwest Arkansas, North America, and the globe, I feel really comfortable being for a lot of different models of church. I was talking to my friend Cameron Hager, who's a church planter in Portland, and we had the conversation where we said, I am over trying to sell people on our models the best.
Yeah.
I don't care to try to make that case.
Yeah.
But I do love what we're doing.
It works for us here now.
It works for us here now, and it's beautiful. And the church down the street that's taken a different approach but is still faithful to the gospel, to those core things, man, praise God for that. And that's actually relieves a lot for me of not having to make that case, but just say, we're trying to be faithful to what Christ laid down, and so is this church down the road or on the other side of the country or whatever. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that. That's pretty fun.
That's good. So if I'm sitting in the Mosaic congregation and I am maybe a believer for 40 years and I've read the book of Acts every year for the last 40 years, great. Maybe I'm a person who's just shown up within the last year kind of for the first time finding a new faith, and the book of Acts is really novel to me, and anywhere in between those. What do you think engaging the book well this year just as an individual would look like, and kind of what what might you inspire us toward this year?
I think the biggest thing I would say, and I think this applies to both of those kinds of people you described, is don't put limits on what God might want for his church that God hasn't put there. So be ready to be surprised by how big God's vision for the church is. That you might look at the book of Acts and go, wow, God really has a pretty amazing vision for my community, for my relationship to other believers, for the way we care for each other, the way he wants to reach lost people. I think it's easy to grow cynical and bored with church when you've been around it for a long time. And I think that might be the challenge of being in a very churched culture, is that we might feel like, yeah, we know what this has to offer. And I'd say be willing to be surprised. Like, read the book of Acts with that lens. It's one of my favorite things about talking to people from global contexts in unchurched areas, is to hear the surprise that happens when people hear about Jesus and the church is planted for the first time. And so I would hope that we could be surprised as we read the book of Acts this year.
Yeah, that's good. God feels capable of surprising me often. So that sounds like a worthwhile endeavor. A podcast I listen to often ends after he does an interview with the question, well, is there anything else that I was not smart enough to ask, but that you feel like it would be good for people to hear?
Maybe here is a caution on the other side of the surprise thing, is also a kind of patience thing, in that it is very easy as we talk about church to become frustrated and discontent with the real life church that you're actually in. And that was something one of my professors in seminary said that stuck with me so powerfully. Was he said, hey, you're getting ready to go pastor people, and you always have to have your hands reaching out. He had put his hands really wide, holding on to two things at once. One was the vision that God gives for his church, and then the other is the actual real people that he gives you. And the real people, the real churches we're in, never measure up to the fullness of what God calls the church to be. And so, maybe the counter to my be ready to be surprised, never grow tired of looking for this incredible vision for church. On the other hand, when you catch a beautiful vision of church, it's going to be really easy to go, wow, this thing I'm living in is horrible. Let me go find people that are actually living this. And the reality is no one's living it perfectly. Yeah. So you have to you have to hold that tension together of patience. Just like God has incredible patience for me personally, he also has a lot of patience for his church. And I think calls us to have a lot of patience for our church. And so that might be the other side of the coin that I would encourage us towards is be ready to be surprised, be ready to be called to more beautiful, more pure, more full things for the church, but also be ready to be really patient, because it takes a long time to get there. Actually, we won't get there this side of eternity. And so we're walking together. And so be ready to go slow with the real people God's actually put in your living room, in your neighborhood, in the church, worshiping together, because we are all imperfect people trying to follow Jesus together.
That's good. Yeah, Acts is exciting. There's so many good stories that I'm excited to just wrestle with. I get to do the Ananias and Sapphira. We're beating around the idea of maybe making it a family service, so we'll see.
Yeah, that'd be great. Tell people they're going to drop dead if they lie in church.
Yeah. Well,
that's not what the point of the message is, by the way.
Yeah.
Just I'll give that one away early.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the year ahead, and looking forward to just seeing what the Lord stirs in my own spirit, and what he stirs in the people that are here that love each other well. So we love you, and we're excited to step into this book together. Go in peace, I guess. Here you go.